Hello, anybody who's just joined or has been waiting. I'm gonna give it about a minute or so here before I get started. I don't anticipate having as many people on this as say like a winter thread like we had with Winter Storm Jonas last year. But being that I got so many questions within the Zcast inbox regarding, hey, is this going to affect my beach plans? What about here? What about there? To kind of alleviate some of that and give some insight into what this system is doing. As I've been personally tracking it now for about, I would say about 8 days. A lot of people kind of hit by surprise with this because we'll talk a little bit about how there's another system that just grazed over the Outer Banks today. But that is not this system. So when they heard that it was just going to graze and move on, and then suddenly now they're seeing, oh, what happened to the weekend forecast? All of a sudden it's, windy and everything else. I think a lot of people were confused. So we're going to go ahead and we'll get started here in a few minutes. We'll talk a little bit about how there's another system. So that was just me talking there. We'll give it about another minute, let people come on in. If you got any questions, use the chat. I'm probably going to decouple this, pop it out and have it up over here because I'm going to be using my browser mostly to go over everything else we got going on and show some models and graphics and all that jazz. But we'll give it a minute. Sorry, real quick in chat too. Just let me know if you can hear me or not. I know we've had issues in the past where I've been talking and people are like, what's up? I can't hear you. So just let me know if that's the case. I'll change the setting. It should be good, but it's hard to tell on my end. If someone would just let me know. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Okay. Okay, a little more boost. I upped the gain a little bit. Let me know if it's any better. I don't want to like scream into the mic, but let me know if that works. Again, this first go around for late 2016. As far as a live cast, we've had nothing but scorching hot weather to really talk about when it comes to the mid-Atlantic. So bear with me if there's any technical issues. Haven't really streamed much lately, but we'll get started here. Now there's a few other people joining. Okay. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. People can catch up later. And this will be on my YouTube channel. If you want to go back and review anything, it'll also be up on my Facebook link as well, where you can check it out if you happen to misplace the URL or something. So this was little old Invest 99L. I would say this is really the point where I started paying attention because it had on the Euro, again, probably about 8 days ago, it was showing that it was going to make its way somewhat close to the Gulf of Mexico. So when I saw that, the only thing I could really think of was if a piece of energy could make its way from, this area here, right, just east of the Dominican Republic, and then make its way up into the Gulf. There's plenty of energy and warm enough temperatures, and the sea surface temperatures, that is, to produce something that could cause issues for the Gulf. Whenever I hear Gulf pieces, anything making its way into the Gulf, there's less shear. It's a ripe environment for a piece of energy to explode, right? So in the last 24 hours, for the first time, really, with this system that is now Hurricane Hermine, you could see that intensification. It is just blown up. We'll get a little bit more into that. But the thing that really piqued my interest with this was the GFS. It had this going off to the right, if you will, the east coast of Florida, and then going out to sea. And when I saw this is when I really started to pay attention, because it wasn't handling the track of the storm right. Yet the Euro was, because it was going west into the Gulf, and it was following the principal rules where a low, when it encounters a more powerful high, it will tend to either redirect it or sit underneath it, cause it to stall, but it's not going to behave and move up into it. And that high pressure center, if you looked at the Euro and even on the GFS at times, was sitting right over here over North Carolina. So it made no sense to me why the GFS was saying, oh yeah, sure, I'm just going to knock this high out of the way and, make its way right up the coast. I just couldn't believe that. So that's why I started paying attention, because whenever you have a model conflict like that, they're both onto something. And because this was intriguing, it's the Atlantic, it's one of the first systems that would threaten the East Coast this year. I tend to be a little bit more in the Euro camp. I don't think that's a secret by any means. I just feel as though it's a more superior model, and it is. Factually, it really is. If you look across verifications, it tends to do track better. It will intensify storms a little more. It'll juice them up a little bit more than they actually are. So that's something that has to be thought of when you look through these first models. The next thing I'm going to bring up is one of my favorite things is I like to look up analogues, like what historical events have happened, especially with tropical systems, that will show kind of similarities to what's currently going on. And so you can see here, this is back in June of 1966, one of the earliest hurricanes, if not the earliest, that ever hit within the Gulf of Mexico on the Florida shores. But you can see here that it hugged Florida on the western coast a lot more than the current system is. But it is taking a track very close by Tallahassee, which, again, is right about here. If you can see my mouse here, I'm going to try to zoom in. I know it's hard for you guys to see. Let me know if the stream is having any issues for anyone. One person said that, okay, might be a bandwidth issue. Sorry, buddy. But you can see here that it's kind of telling a similar tale that models have been saying about Hermine with this system. It makes its way up the East Coast, kind of dips out over the Outer Banks, and then kind of gets drawn back into the East Coast. And I looked up some stats with this system. A lot of beach erosion occurred. There was a lot of surges from the Outer Banks all the way up to Boston, believe it or not. That's something to think of this weekend. If you guys are doing any traveling, you might be away from the precipitation shield that is coming off of this hurricane. You might not be affected by like localized flooding or anything like that, but if you are next to a body of water, or if you are next to like, somewhere on the ocean or whatnot, you have to be mindful that the current's going to be extremely rough. There's going to be riptides, and in a lot of areas, there's going to be piers that are taken out to sea, structures that fall. That type of a scenario is what we're looking at right now for the East Coast, not to mention the amount of rain that certain areas are going to get. So this is a good analog for that, and it was a little bit stronger than what Hermine was about 2 hours ago, although Hermine is strengthening very quickly, something else we'll get into, but this is kind of a general idea of kind of an analog that happened already, something that Hermine might actually kind of follow its own path. Ooh, zoom out here a little bit. So speaking about the East Coast in particular, I'll get a little bit more into what's currently happening, but I want to talk a little bit more about what's going to happen. So this is a Euro ensemble spread, right? So for every run that you see, operational run of the Euro, after that, it breaks down into, I want to say 37 runs. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but 37 individual runs, which is why you see about 37 little L's here for the lows. But what's interesting is they are very clustered with the system. So it has a pretty good idea of where that low is going to pass over North Carolina. By the way, this is around, I want to say early Saturday. Its system might slow down even more, but let's just shoot for early Saturday right now, being around 8 a.m.-ish. But that's where that low would roughly be. And as you can see, what I find very interesting is the National Hurricane Center has kind of moved their cone here. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. Probably not. I'm trying my best here. Here we go. The National Hurricane Center has kind of moved their cone out here a little bit, out to the east, based on data and guidance that's about, 8 hours, 12 hours old. What I will tell you is that the hurricane's current track is a little bit more north right now than northeast, like the model guidance suggested on the last previous runs. So I think they're going to come a little bit more west with their that cone of uncertainty, as I like to call it. Again, that's a tough task for those guys to try to visualize that for people. A lot of people take it too literally. Just understand that windshield wiper effect is, we're doing a western swing right now with some of these runs. I know the last GFS came a tad bit more west. I think he'll do it even more tonight. I think he'll do even more on the Euro tonight as well. So with these ensemble members, they really like the guidance to come right over the western part of the Outer Banks. And it's probably going to park its butt right here, right next to Delmarva, maybe a little bit further east, or maybe in this area. But again, soil erosion, rough surf, you're going to have storm surges, a lot of effects anywhere near waterways or, again, and someone brought up Norfolk, like Virginia Beach area and Norfolk, you will definitely see a rise in tide. As far as like storm surge, no, you're not going to see that because the northeastern side of this hurricane is where the storm surge is, right? As it pushes its way up, imagine you pushing your hand right in a lake and you just kind of move it in the water, right? As you do that, where do the ripples end up? Are they the majority of the energy is the front of your hand, right? And that's the same thing. This hurricane, as it moves up the coast, the surge is going to come from the southwest to the northeast. That's where you're going to get your surge. Now, that's not to say areas won't get surge, but the majority of the impactful surge is going to be in areas that coming from the southwest to the northeast. So surge-wise, I won't worry too much there, but you guys are going to get a lot of rain, and Norfolk floods with a stiff half-inch rain, so just be prepared. So we'll go to the next slide. So the reason I bring this up again is you can see that from the get-go, this thing was just, they want to have it go right into Florida. Then it said, no, let's all go into the Gulf. And then the Euro was the first and the rest followed. So here we are. It's kind of showing that progression. And I bring that up because I'm using the Euro as my control. I'm not going to use any other model right now because it nailed track first. It might not have nailed the intensity, but none of the models nailed the intensity. They were all off because it took so long for 99L to actually form. It took forever. Look, I'm a patient person. I was ready to give up on this thing so many times. But the fact that it just didn't quit across the Hispanielas, north of Cuba, making its way west into the Gulf, I knew that this thing was somehow going to pick up enough energy to do some sort of impact. Now, if you had asked me 3 days ago, I would have said tropical storm, maybe a category 1. I think on the subreddit that I constantly frequent, wait, that's a double negative, that I frequent, I've been seeing 980 millibars on landfall, which is around a category 1. I think we're going to be below that based on recent guidance. But again, I'm showing this because I want to show you that these models, they shifted west like the Euro did. The Euro had that track first. The ensemble, that's my control. So that's why I bring this up next. So there's something very interesting that I've noticed. And this is the Euro that ran today around 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And when it initialized, meaning when it first started running, it showed, it showed the low at 996 millibars. Okay, so it basically said at the time that this initialized that the storm should be at 996, and then each 12 hours thereafter, or it'll track the actual intensity. But it initialized too high, meaning the storm itself, in actuality, based on reconnaissance planes that we fly through and drones, showed it at 990 millibars or 989 millibars real time versus what this says it should have been at 996. That already is a problem for models because they're underestimating the intensity of the storm. They're starting here, but the storm's like, oh, no. We're actually down here in terms of millibars. Okay, you need to, And as these models start to catch up, that data that from these planes that fly through the hurricanes that eventually make their way back to station and they upload them, and then the servers that run these models take that data and ingest it, that won't be available until tonight's runs, right? So I think, and it's going to be kind of ironic, when the GFS runs tonight, it will finally show, oh, hey, look, it's going to be about 980, 979 millibars when this lands, and it will be landing. So it's kind of moot point at that. So the Euro, a little off on intensity, but track, it's got it down. So it shows it at 996, and then I've got to zoom out here to do this. Should have downloaded each frame. 24 hours later, and this is what I find quite interesting. It's sitting between southern Georgia and northern Florida at 986 millibars. That's pretty impressive considering that right now it's at 983 and making its way even further down. So I think by the time it actually gets to near Savannah, Georgia, or in this area that it's depicting, I think it's going to be pretty much right around 983, right where it is right now. There'll be some weakening. So it's still going to be a very intense storm in through the evening and all day tomorrow. So that's something we'll continue to watch. And as far as an East Coast impact, again, this is another 24 hours later. Here it is. It's showing it sitting right, excuse me there, sitting right east of the Outer Banks, just over North Carolina. Still, again, very, very strong tropical storm, 994 millibars. Now, as it makes its way up into the Chesapeake, this is where I think things are getting very interesting. Let's back up here. So here we are. It's now been 2 days, right? This is Sunday. It's now been 2 days since the storm hit. 2.5 days, really. Gosh, I'm not doing well with this. There we go. And it's strengthening, it's deepening once again because it's sitting out over the very warm waters off the shore of the mid-Atlantic, right? So the water right now, that's over South Jersey, that's over eastern Maryland, is around 86 degrees, right? That's just 2 degrees cooler than the Gulf of Mexico. So that means shear now will be a bit of a factor, right? There's some more winds, crosswinds that are going to not allow it to intensify too much, but it will deepen, it will intensify more, it'll fire off some more convection, and this is not a good scenario for anyone on the East Coast. I would say from DC proper east, especially because the rains anywhere from 8 to 10 inches in that zone and east, and you're also talking about winds sustained at 35 to 45 miles an hour, but with gusts up to 60, 70 miles an hour. If the Euro in this last run, which I again believe is going to come a little bit more west, maybe not much, but a little bit of a jog. If this Euro verifies, which again so far has had the best track and recently the best intensity rating, because the GFS has been kind of laughing at the storm in terms of intensity. Well, we're laughing at the GFS now because this storm is finally starting to show why it needed to be watched, why it was such a threat. So 992 millibars, you're talking about soil erosion or beach erosion. Again, structures that are on the ocean are going to take a beating, waves out of control. I mean, this is not going to be beach weather, people. So if you have beach plans this weekend, I would really advise you to find something else to do. You're going to be disappointed, even if you're from Central Jersey, up to Long Island areas. The surf is just going to be so rough. And you're going to have chances of rain too, and thunderstorm, downpour type rain with a very thick cloud cover. So again, not really vacation material. This is a great weekend to get to a theater and watch whatever there is out there right now. So the next thing we'll get into is the GFS, and here is why I keep harping on the GFS is not handling this storm. This is the run at 6 o'clock today. Okay, so we're talking just 2 hours, 3 hours ago, this ran. It shows it had a 998 at its current state. When it initialized, it showed it at a 998. We're at like 983 right now. This is much stronger than what this is depicting. So I don't trust the GFS as far as intensity is concerned. I think it's starting to get the track down a little better, but this is grossly underestimating what intensity Hermine will be bringing. So that being said, we're going to move a little bit further through this, and we're going to let it play a little bit. Oh, sorry, I skipped a few frames here. Let me go back some. Now you can see right here where it comes off the coast, and then it does this little bit of a boomerang effect, right? Like a banana effect. It comes back towards the coast, almost like it gets sucked in. That is because, let me pause it. Oh, you went away. Go back 2 frames. There we go. If you see here, there's this high pressure, that blue H up there. There's a trough that is in here. And as this trough comes down over the United States and heads towards the southeast. These two pieces of energy, this trough splits. This allows this system to move and then pull back in a little bit towards the coast. Now, if you were to ask my opinion on do I think the track here is right, I think the GFS might be a little too far east. I think it's going to, again, come back west, like I was saying before. And even if it doesn't, though, it is off in intensity, so it's going to be more intense than depicted. But even in its current state, if the GFS verified, this would be a major event in terms of beach erosion, storm surges, some localized flooding, etc. And it's just not going to make for a good weekend for anyone along the East Coast. If this tracks west about 100 miles, if that next run and it comes 100 miles even further west, guys inland, we're going to have a terrible time. I'm out in Warrenton, Virginia. Areas like where I am are looking at maybe like an inch and a half of rain if it stays where it's at currently. If it comes back west, we're going to be around 4 or 5 inches of rain with heavier winds, power outages more likely. So that being said, it's going to be an I-95 corridor effect, whether it's beachgoers, whether it's people that are just inland. And if it comes further west, it'll affect even more people. Next thing I'm going to show you here, this is one of my favorite things. This is offered by Google Maps. Google Earth. And what I wanted to show you is that trough I was talking about. That's going to affect how this storm gets pulled in. So if you can see right here, this is the remnants up here. Sorry. It's crapping out my computer here. Here we go. This is the remnants of TD8, which made its way near North Carolina and then is now boomeranging the heck out because this guy's pushing him out. He's helping out a lot. As this makes its way up the coast here, and again, I think it's going to be more like this and then bends its way up and out. As it makes its way up, this area here, as you can see, there's not much resistance. There's a high pressure here, and I'm going to back up a little bit. There's a high pressure that's up in here. This area, it's the path of least resistance, right? So as Hermine makes its way up the coast and then decides to come across the Outer Banks just just west of it, and makes its way a little bit northeast, it's gonna sit here. And I really believe that that's when the biggest effects are going to happen on the East Coast, because it can spawn some pretty nasty weather, and it can basically act as a nor'easter at that point. Heavy rains, and we're talking like temperatures in the 60s too, guys. Like, we're not talking about like 80s, 90s, anything. We're talking about driving rains. Thunderstorms definitely possible, but temperatures in the 60s, some areas maybe in the mid 50s. So it's going to be quite an event, quite a shift in temperature for us here in the Mid-Atlantic. So let's talk a little bit about its current condition, where it's at, what it's doing. Apologize, it takes a little bit to load these right now because everyone and their mom is looking at these images in the weather community. But as you can see, and mind you, this loop is roughly, how old is it? It's about 4 hours. It's about a 4-hour loop. Apologize here, can't really see too well, but it's about a 4-hour loop, and it's made quite a move towards the coast in that 4 hours. Actually, I'm sorry, it's about 6 hours. So in the last 6 hours, it's made quite a bit of progress. But the area that is interesting to me, it's not what's on the coast, it's not what's coming. It's what's forming south and what's forming west, because those areas have been the weakest in the storm so far, and they are firing off. And there's another satellite image I'll show you that will support that. So as this rotates and makes its way up the coast, you can see that, areas that are just just east of Panama City and Mexico Beach, they are going to experience 6 to 8 foot 6 to 8 foot rises at sea level with some surges that extend beyond 10 feet. So, and that was based on the intensity that the storm was rated at 6 hours ago, right? Even 8 hours ago. In that time, it has really ramped up the intensity. And here is something also that I want to dispel that I've heard a little bit of on Twitter, even on Facebook. Everyone's saying, oh, it's just a category 1. It's not a big deal, whatever. Okay. And a category 1 hurricane that is strengthening is a lot more impactful. I won't say dangerous, but it's a lot more impactful than a category 2 that is weakening, right? It's the trend of where that system is headed. The intensity is being upped, right? That can lead to higher storm surges. That can lead to more power lines being down, because the winds, not only were they sustained at like 35, 45 knots, suddenly they get increased. Matter of fact, something I'll bring up right here. This here was recorded from an aircraft that flew above one of the National Hurricane Center's assets. It flew above the about 6,000 foot level, and it experienced 102 knots. You can see that here. That's like 118, 120 mile an hour winds at 6,000 feet. So it is very intense. It is increasing the amount of intensity versus it leveling off or decreasing intensity. That's what makes this such a dangerous storm right now. And something to keep in mind if you're in Tallahassee, if you're in southern Georgia, especially like areas around Savannah, Georgia, that are near a lot of water, you're going to get some localized flooding. I think you're going to start to see a little bit of warnings when it comes to storm surge as well. Okay, and there were a couple other things that I was going to show here. I think we're good on that. But last but not least, and just to show you what's happening with the system, as it makes its approach, and again, this is over the course of 3.5 hours, this loop. As it makes its approach, you can see clearly the eye is formed, right? As it makes its approach here towards the Gulf, to the Big Bend, if you will. But you can see here in the center, watch this convective flare up. And it's right around the eye wall, right? So as we got closer towards the evening, you can see the sun going down in the actual image itself. That classic pinhole look to the system is appearing. And that is, again, from a space view, that's how you kind of tell whether or not a storm has gotten its act together, where it has, in each quadrant of the storm, the southeast, northeast, northwest, southwest, if all cylinders are firing on the storm, and it has, and look, it's doing it right before it makes landfall. It's still going to be probably another 4 to 5 hours, 6 hours before it actually makes landfall. But why this is important is because this is a strengthening system versus a weakening system. Right now, we're nowhere near the intensity of Katrina, anything like that. But the reason I bring it up is Katrina actually weakened before it made landfall. It went from a category 5 to roughly a high category 3 as it started to make its impact. So the kinetic energy was decreasing. Meanwhile, in Hermine, it increases. And I think that's important to note, because I think people are going to kind of dismiss this a little bit initially, because, they hear category 1, it's on the West Coast, it's not on the East Coast, or West Coast of Florida, not on the East Coast. It's hitting an area that's not as populated because there's a lot of wildlife refuges there. So, it's not, not that big of a deal. But I really think tonight, that's when you're going to start to hear about the damages that have been done in areas like Tallahassee, at the border of northern Florida and southern Georgia. And as it makes its way up the coast, tomorrow morning, the images are going to be interesting to see, especially off the coast of like North Carolina and whatnot, as we make our way closer to that area. I think those areas are really going to they need to understand that, an action plan of action needs to be in place. If you're going to go on vacation, understand that you're going to be sitting indoors if you're going to be on the coast. If not, I mean, you're maybe an adrenaline junkie and you enjoy to go witness these things outdoors. The bottom line is, guys, Hermine ruined Labor Day weekend for everyone up the East Coast. Maybe if you're up in Boston and north of that in Maine, you'll be fine in terms of, early on. I think into late Sunday or early Monday, you might get impacts, but you'll make it through most of the weekend unscathed. But for everyone from Florida all the way up to New Jersey, there's going to be some sort of effect on your weekends, especially along the beaches. Don't expect bright, sunny skies. And as Hermine intensifies, we'll see what the Florida impact will be. But I'll also be monitoring what happens once it makes its way off of the coast of the Atlantic, where it exits off over the Atlantic, and where it ends up stalling. Anyway, guys, thanks very much for tuning in. If you guys have any questions, please hit me up on Facebook with Zcast, or you can give me a question here real quick in the YouTube chat. I may or may not be doing another one of these depending upon what happens with the storm. But it's been a pleasure. Again, let me know if you have any questions, and I will hand it off to you guys here for a couple minutes. Ego Trip, you said something about, let's see here. Let's see. So something gets said about where the eye is expected to pass relative to Tallahassee. Could someone echo in chat? Ego Trip, the eye, it's moving more north than it is northeast per models. I would venture to guess that you guys are going to get a really close shave. You're going to experience some of the outer wall winds, which are going to be the most intense. Again, I keep in this loop up here. You can see that convection just blowing up here, and it's organizing itself as it makes the approach. So I would expect you to see some of the most intense parts of this system, if not the most intense. Hampton Roads, as far as wind impact, that's going to be really hard to determine right now. I'm going to be honest with you. But based on models and based on kind of looking at some of the analogs, and then also considering current conditions and how it's strengthening, I would say Hampton Roads is going to be more of an event late Saturday. Early Saturday. It's going to be more like as it makes its way into North Carolina. Where it exits is going to be a big deal for you guys, because if it goes further east and makes its way off the Outer Banks, then I think there's going to be very little effect, maybe some winds. But if it decides to go more north-northeast or north and go right over the Chesapeake, or a little bit just east of the Chesapeake, I think there you're going to see some definite surge. And then you're also going to see increased rains, which I don't need to tell you that a 1-inch rainstorm can cause havoc there. But do that over a 24-hour period, you're talking about 3 to 5, 8 inches of rain. So there can definitely be an impact. But wind-wise, I would say minimal, anywhere from right now 30, 40 mile an hour sustained winds with some gusts up to 60. How would it impact Southwest Connecticut? That's very specific in Connecticut too. Here's the thing. We'll go back to the Euro here real quick. Here we go. I would say, we're looking at probably a early Monday impact for you guys, actually. You see how it just kind of stalls there. This is Tuesday. So Labor Day weekend, you guys are clear, like I was saying, really from like Boston north. I kind of lumped you guys into that. So you're going to be fine, Harry, as far as Southwest Connecticut. If you're anywhere near the beaches, though, you might not have a good time with the surf. But and then being out on a boat, I don't think I would do it. It looks like it's projected to go directly over Valdosta, Georgia. How do you think that will look? So, look, when it comes to landfall in Florida, I think that's going to be the most impactful region when it comes to surge, when it comes to wind speeds, when it comes to flooding. Because, again, it's the majority of its moisture, whatnot, will be dumped on this, this section right here from... If I drew a line from, say, Rosemary Beach over east to Jacksonville, that is going to be where the majority of the moisture gets dumped on this thing until it gets over the Atlantic, where it is going to intensify. So Southeast Georgia is really going to feel it. You guys are going to get a lot of rain. Now, you guys need it. I know the corn farmers have been hitting me up. A lot of some of these other guys that have businesses that involve crops, they're cheering this thing on. But too much rain is also not a good thing. So you're going to get a lot of rain, and it's going to come quick. So that's going to cause localized flooding, especially areas in and around Southeast Georgia, near Savannah. And Brett, again, this goes for you. Yeah, and that's an interesting point, Ray. You said that people in your area dismiss it as just a little rain. Look, talk to the people in Louisiana about what they've been through the last month and the rains that they had. Now, they're used to the flooding, and that's in a very extreme situation where this won't dump nearly as much rain as they got. But all it takes within a 24-hour period is 3 to 5 inches for it to be disastrous for some people's businesses and homes. You combine that with tropical force winds, hurricane force winds. I mean, that's nothing to really take light. So don't be out on the roads. Don't drive over shallow water. Just be smart. Be smart about it. And definitely don't dismiss it. Definitely don't dismiss it. I'm going to check my Facebook page real quick just to see if there's any questions up on the main page. I know some people did that back in the winter. Doesn't look like there's any. Okay. Good deal. Well, guys, look, thank you very much for joining. I want to make sure I let everyone know, hey, have water on hand, batteries, all the essentials. Power goes out. Stay away from areas that flood during a stiff rain, and try to have fun this weekend and work around it. There's a lot of things that can be done out there. Just be smart about your decisions and continue to monitor the situation, because as we know, weather is dynamic and it follows trends. The trends right now, strengthening and somewhat of a tick west, and a tick west is actually good for the majority of the East Coast if it does that, because that actually reduces its ability to re-strengthen and actually end up dissipating. But based on guidance that I've looked at, I think the models are pretty much where they're going to be track-wise, maybe just a tad more west, and that's what's going to end up happening. You guys all have a good night. There'll be more on the page tomorrow morning. Thank you.